Amongst the different art forms the Christians created, we definitely see frescoes and paintings. We do see a few types of sculptures, but one of the most favored mediums with Christian artists were mosaics. A really beautiful example of those mosaics is the Christ as the Good Shepherd mosaic. It's found in the Mausoleum of Galla Placidia in Ravenna. Even though this building is called the Mausoleum of Galla Placidia, she's actually not buried there. Likely, the three that are buried there are her brother, her son, and her husband. Following the Roman tradition, it is pretty plain on the outside. We do see a central plan. You can see the brick here that was a common material for construction in Roman architecture. We do have some blind niches with a little arcade kind of format, but it's not very decorative. Like most Roman structures, the emphasis was placed on the interior of the building. Early Christians are going to follow that same format. Less attention to the exteriors of the buildings. They're pretty plain, they're pretty utilitarian, and instead they give a lot of attention to the interior. When you look at the interior shot, you can really see how luxurious it is. They have a lot of mosaics here lining the walls, as well as beautiful stone revetments. This was a really opulent example of an interior. The mosaics really appealing to the early Christians. They created this atmosphere that was otherworldly and spiritual. They reflected the light, and they felt like early Christians felt like that was a symbol for God's divinity. All of this was really appealing to them when they're thinking about how to create a spiritual space. We can see, looking at this detail of a mosaic, that they are made from individual little pieces that are put together to create this illusion of an image. Those individual pieces are called tesserae. For the early Christians, they usually like to do glass mosaics. Sometimes they did colored glasses. Sometimes they did glass that was faced with gold or something on the back. And they did use some precious stones as well. Now you can see where that detail fits in. This is the mosaic of Christ as the Good Shepherd that is found within that Mausoleum of Galla Placidia in Ravenna. It's a great example of how early Christian mosaics show the style of the time, where some of the classical elements from the Roman past were continuing but fading out, and instead those non-classical elements were becoming more and more dominant. In this particular example, you can see a few things that remind us of that classical naturalism. Look at the sheep. We've got one that is foreshortened and coming out toward us. That creates a sense of depth. There is a little bit of modeling. That's pretty hard to achieve in mosaic, but that too adds to a sense of depth. Those things that remind us of believable space are definitely something that we would associate with the classical naturalism of the past. The sense of setting also adds to that space. If you look, there is some atmospheric perspective, right, where things get kind of lighter and gray in the background. And we definitely get the feel that the stones and the water are receding away from us as we look. All of that is classical as well. We got the classical calm on the face of Christ, and we don't have a really strict frontal pose, right? Those kind of stiff front-facing poses are really common of the non-classical early Christian elements. The last thing that we could kind of cite here as being part of the classical tradition that's still persisting even in this early Christian period would be the believable proportions. The sheep, for instance, have legs that look like the right length of legs for a sheep, so the proportions are pretty good. All of those are ways that we see some classicism still hanging on from the earlier Roman period, but it's beginning to be more and more displaced in this early Christian period by non-classical elements. And that was a trend that was already increasing in that late imperial period, incorporating more and more of that non-classical approach. The few things that we see here that are non-classical, we've got some stylization. Look at the sheep, and again, you can see that we've got elements there that show stylization in the coat. If you look at the face of Christ, it's pretty generic. There's not a lot of detail. It doesn't look very individualized. That's more non-classical. Even though the proportions aren't bad, there's definitely less attention to the bulk and the sense of anatomy in the body and trying to make the body look like it's really working in real time and in real space. Those are all elements that show that non-classical approach increasing. In addition to showing that early Christian style where we get a mix with some of the Roman world from the past, this also shows something common for the early Christian artworks, and that is the use of Roman symbols and adapting them and giving them new Christian overtones and meanings. So the shepherd theme is one of those. Here we have Christ as the Good Shepherd, which refers directly to scriptures from the Christian Bible that are meant to exemplify how Christ cares for his people. But the theme of the shepherd was something that we had in Roman art earlier. We definitely saw it tied with representations of Apollo. We also had shepherd themes as a dominant subject for literature as well as for art. Now we have taken that Roman motif and we've given it Christian meaning. In addition, if you look at Christ, he is shown as though he is an emperor. So the Roman imperial dress here is now being used as a symbol to show Christ's power. The gold, the purple on the robe and the drapery. The halo is something also that was used for representations of the Greek god Helios. It was also used for Greek representations of Hellenistic rulers on coins. It was meant to kind of connote their tie with the gods and how they had a divine right to rule. Romans used it for pagan gods like Apollo, and the emperors in Rome, especially Constantine is a great example, they used the halo too. So we have all of these precedents in the classical world, and now it is being translated to be given Christian significance. It starts to take on the connotations that this is a holy figure, that this is an important figure. So Roman symbols being adapted, being changed, used to enhance Christian meanings. That's another element we see within early Christian artworks. Overall, when we look at this mosaic, we can see quite a few common characteristics that we associate with early Christian art in terms of medium, subject, and style.